there is no one killer app, and there's no one killer connected solution. At the end of the day, you're going to have connected devices around you, and once you start integrating those together and putting together a full story around it, then I think the light bulbs are going to go off.
Welcome to the Schmidt List, the podcast for people dedicated to managing successful projects, developing impactful products, and building engaged teams. And now, here's your host, Kurt Schmidt.
Justin, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Kurt. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're here. Tell me a little bit about the work that you personally do, and what about the work that Lab 651 does?
Sure. Well, my background is in software engineering. I've been doing that for a couple decades now. And, that's really my primary focus at Lab 651 is sort of helping our software team execute everything from mobile applications to cloud apps to a lot more of the data science around connected products. So companies come to us at Lab 651 to wanting to build smarter solutions. And it can be everything from a physical device that sits in your home that allows you to control things to an automation system at a factory, for example, in an industrial complex. And so oftentimes that kind of needs to involve multiple types of technology, multiple types of engineering skill. And so Lab 651 sort of brings together a team of not only software engineers that I lead, but also engineers, mechanical industrial designers that can build the physical thing. And we also have electrical and firmware developers that can do the electronics and the sensors and all the sort of embedded work.
Sure, that sounds great. And how long has the company been around?
It's been 3 years now.
Nice.
Yep. So we're still kicking here.
I know how you feel. Yeah. Foundry is going to be 4 this year, and it's grown quite a bit. So we're very proud too. So congratulations.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Likewise.
So what I wanted to specifically talk to you today is about the whole idea of connected things in either the home or the workplace or all that other stuff, right? Tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we should be further along. I feel like it just is a society, right? I get it. Like you go and you look at the Philips Hue and it's like $400 a light bulb and all this other stuff. But then when I look at, when we've done some IoT stuff and this stuff off the shelf is not super expensive and you can iterate on the hardware or the software side pretty quickly. And there's a lot of frameworks and things that are kind of pre-built out there, right? But why have you found that other people are kind of stuck, maybe not doing more with connected devices in their business or in home?
Yeah, the term Internet of Things, IoT, is a buzzword that really started taking off in sort of 2013 or so. And so we're kind of 5 years into it. And honestly, the term IoT, I feel, is actually going away. Oh. I'm of the opinion that it is more, actually should have been called Things on the Internet, actually, rather than an Internet of Things. I think everyone kind of got it flipped around.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, what I'm seeing and talking with more and more customers about is what's the value prop at the end of the day, right? So why would you actually be connecting these things? And I think
because it's cool, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's why you do it, right?
Well, did you buy your iPhone because it's cool? You probably bought it because it had some functionality.
It works. I like it.
Exactly.
It works good.
Yeah. So I think technology needs to be kind of embedded and all around us in a certain standpoint.
Sure.
And it needs to be easy to use. And some of these products are, quite frankly, not that easy to use to begin with. And maybe as a technologist, and to us it is, but think about our parents or the other generation. So there is a little bit of a fear factor, I think, with regards to how do I turn this thing on, right?
Sure.
And so there's sort of that barrier to entry, which, I think back, I was writing mobile apps before the iPhone or Android even came out.
Yeah.
And when those sort of smartphones came out, a lot of people were saying, why do I need that? I got my BlackBerry, right?
Right.
And as all of us who were building these things, we were thinking of the future, right? And that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm always sort of looking to the next disruptive technology. And it was like, but, there's this thing called the App Store and now, it's touch screen and now it's got sensors and gyros on it. You can do all sorts of stuff.
Right.
But to the common user, they don't see that from the get-go. And it takes time. And so,
sure.
We're definitely, coming on many, many years into this thing. And I would agree that it's not as far along as I would have thought. But I also think there's two segments there. There's consumer, which is where we're kind of thinking about smart home. But there's also space that we deal a lot is in the industrial and manufacturing and agriculture space.
Yeah.
And
which it seems like it's just, you just a given.
It's just a given. Yeah. Especially in industrial manufacturing. The key there is there is a lot of return on investment that can happen. So, and also these sensors and these machines are out there, but they're not connected to the internet. So we're talking with a lot of companies about actually saying, okay, you've got this system out here, but how can we bring it together using sensors from other places, tying it into your ERP system, tying it into your Salesforce, tying it into all sorts of other different stuff to make that, yes, you have a connected machine and that machine's been connected or digitized for many years, but now getting that data and doing something with it can be extremely important. And I'll give you one example. So we're working with a company right now, and they actually have product that they develop. It's actually leather. And so there is right now humans that are grabbing this leather as it's still in hide form, and they're grabbing it and feeling it and grading it and touching it, getting all sorts of information about it, and they're assigning a grade to it. Well, why? When computer vision systems can do that, there's no reason as to why you should be having humans do it. So we're trying to work with companies on let humans do what they do best and let machines and computer vision and stuff like that and sensors do what they do best. And so there's a big opportunity there. And honestly, this company, if they just shave a couple percentage points off of what they were doing, there's millions of dollars that could be saved.
So is it just education that blocks a lot of these folks? They don't know what they don't know? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I think that's part of it. I also think they probably haven't run the calculations on what the return on investment is. So this particular instance came out really from a financial model. They ran a financial model and said, oh my gosh, if we could do this, we would save this. And then they came to us and they said, could we do this? And we said, yes. And so I think, yeah, they don't know what the sensors are, what's possible. Some of them don't know what's off the shelf. And like I say, there's a little bit of a fear factor, I think, with regards to complexity. You're right. You can put a smart things thing in your home and you can monitor when you come and go. But that changes a lot. We've been working with a company where you have stuff out in the field. So we're doing tank monitoring of liquids and gases and stuff like that. And so this thing needs to be solar powered. It needs to withstand extreme pressure, chemicals, all sorts of different stuff. And that's a harder problem to solve.
Yeah.
And when companies look at that and they say, oh, wow, this is too much to do, that kind of puts them off a little bit.
Tell me if I'm crazy, but it's just like the typical experience. So at Foundry, we work with a lot of very large companies too. And just even like the check-in system with like the RFID badge and all that stuff, it just seems like somebody would have kind of solved and made a cheaper solution to all that stuff and by this time. But I guess, you invest in all these things and what are you going to do, right? Right.
And you're saying check-in system like when somebody you show up at their office and yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things where, again, I'll come back to, is there a value to it, right? And if a clipboard works fine for most of these companies, which maybe it does, then that's the barrier they're going to be at.
So to that point, I mean, what would be your advice if I am on the clipboard side of things, but I'm feeling like maybe I need to, what are some of the typical, I don't know, opportunity signs? I don't like to say warning signs, but like opportunity signs that maybe you should really start looking away from the clipboard at what other possibilities there could be to help connect the way you work better with the devices and things.
Yeah, and there's a couple different angles there. I think so. We're usually dealing with companies that have products. And so I always talk to marketers about, wouldn't you love to know more about how your customers are using your products? And the whole idea that I'm going to send you a survey and you're going to tell me how you're using the products, that is, quite frankly, bull.
Yeah.
Right?
Fill out this form.
Right. And so wouldn't it be great if we could sensorize these products in any sorts of ways to then have you get much finer grained visibility into how the products are being used? And even failures in the field. So, I'll talk with you about another example. So I have a refrigerator. I bought it, many, many years ago. It's not connected. But I'd like to tell the story because it kind of can provide some value to companies that maybe manufacture refrigerators. And Ken Moore is actually one of our clients. But this refrigerator is not, and it's not connected. And so all of a sudden one day the ice maker stopped working. And so I called up the repair person. He came out and he's like, first of all, he said to me, do you like ice? And I said, yeah, I do like ice. He's like, okay. Cause he's like, I could leave right now and not fix it and that would be fine. And I'm like, no, I would like to get it fixed. So he was kind of joking. He's like, sure. All right. So anyways, he calls it in and basically says, okay, the box is going to show up here next week. Don't open it. Just set it aside. Call this number and I'll come back and fix it. Okay. So anyways, week later, box shows up. I set it aside, call the phone number. A couple more days later, guy comes back, opens it up. Wrong part.
Oh,
right?
No.
So now he's calling around. He has to drive around. Took us another couple days to basically end up finding the right thing and coming back.
I can imagine.
So 3 trips, right? Out to my house, back, out to my house, back, out to my house, back, right? And so what's going to happen is, though, that is costly, right? You can tell companies like Samsung and Kenmore and all these types of companies that costs money, costs time. Me as a consumer, honestly, the next thing that's going to happen, I believe, where my future goes, is all of a sudden a part's going to show up at my house and the refrigerator is going to have automatically ordered it.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we're talking about in the future. Yeah. Right? And so as a manufacturer of these appliances, they get lots of other they have the visibility into this stuff. And so, because of this, now there's lots of sensors. There's 100 sensors on a lot of these things. Everything from, vibration to current draw, to how much water you're using, all this type of stuff. And, and that's, I'm just thinking off the top of my head right now, you could actually measure how many gallons of water you've drank in a year now, right? Through this type of stuff. Yeah. And so, they're actually doing stuff with automatic filter replacement. So you just automatically get the filter that shows up. Yeah. Even dishwashers, on demand, it'll automatically order the dishwashing stuff. But the key thing about, trying to fix failures before they happen, right? And so that can be huge savings for companies like that. And then also, I think as a consumer, on the consumer side, it's like, aha, here's some value for me. And as you're building these products and you're connecting things and getting data, I keep telling people it needs to be a two-way street. If it's not valuable to the consumer, they're not going to want to do it. Right. And they're not, and they're not going to check that box to say, yes, you can use my data. Yeah. And if it's not valuable to the company, they're not going to invest the time or effort to put all these sensors on it. So it kind of needs to be a two-way street. Hopefully I touched on some of that you're talking about, but it's really one of these things where, there needs to be value on both sides. And I believe there is value on both sides. And I keep kind of winding back to when the iPhone was and mobile phones were taking off in 2008, where there was still this sort of thing like, why do I want to spend this much money on this expensive thing? I don't really get it. Yeah. And it took some maturity and some time. And honestly, there is no one killer app and there's no one killer connected solution. At the end of the day, you're going to have connected devices around you. And once you start integrating those together and putting together a full story around it, then I think the light bulbs are going to go off. And we haven't seen enough of those. We've seen things like, oh, I want to connect this door, or I want to connect this refrigerator, and honestly, in this factory, I want to connect this one machine. Well, that doesn't help you. Yeah. It's once you have this network of all these things working together, you're getting the data, you're doing analytics on it, then you're spinning it back and saying, as customers are using my products in the field, now I can start offering them this, this, and this. And the next rev of my product now is going to do this.
Sure. So what about in the things that you're talking about? I think one of the concerns that I've heard other folks talk about before is security with this stuff. So, what's your advice and thoughts around the security with this? Like, maybe I am interested in connecting some of these machines, but this data from is really sensitive, or there's no way my customers are going to let me put a chip in their ice maker, right?
Right. Yeah, security is a big red flag that people keep throwing up, because I think what happens a lot of these times is these rapid prototypes that companies build get out in the field.
Yeah, they do.
And so then you have all these security breaches that happen, and people
they make for good juicy news stories when they get found out.
They do. Yeah. And I guess my advice is kind of twofold, I guess. Number one is I would much more rather buy a product from a well-known established company than some knockoff that came off of Kickstarter, right? Because you never know where that data is going to.
Yeah.
The other thing is I wouldn't connect the thing unless I knew there was a value there. Right. So if you can see a value in connecting some things around your home that would make your home more efficient from an energy usage standpoint, make you be able to change your life and react differently or whatever, those are some key reasons. If you're not seeing return on investment or a thing like that, don't do it. Right. And I also firmly believe that I also think manufacturers or people that make these things should actually allow sort of an opt-out option in some ways.
Right.
Where basically, and this gets into more of the distributed computing model. Okay. But the idea where I want to keep my data in my home. And so it's not going to you. It's going to go to a local server that I maybe have, maybe my desktop or my laptop or something like that somewhere. And then I can still get all that value out of it. Like I could still track the water usage that I had. I could still track, there's lots of data that's coming off of these things, but it's not leaving my four walls. And I think that's completely fair for somebody to say, I do not want my data to be shipped to you, but I still want to get value from it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then let's pretend I'm Joe Rogan and you're Elon Musk. What about Skynet? What about, AI and machine learning, and then they take over all the machines and we all get killed? Well, what about, the future with IoT and AI and all that stuff? What have you seen, or what are you excited about?
I don't take a negative, sort of scary approach, I guess, to it. I think at the end of the day, if we can use all these new technologies, these new disruptive technologies to, make a better life for all of us here on Earth, and also create better experiences for us in our products and how we live and how we interact with each other, and kind of use this technology for positive, I think it's good. And I know there's horror stories about somebody being able to hack into people's homes and turn the heat up and turn the heat down, and that's actually is kind of is what's changed with regards to the internet in the past 10 years. 10 years ago or 20 years ago, when the internet first sort of started, it was machines, it was just people, basically putting out information on like websites. And then you got into social media, what I would kind of call Web 2.0, which is basically now I'm publishing content out on the internet and people are reacting to it. Now we're in what I would kind of call Web 3.0, which is these things that are on the internet, and they can actually change what happens in the physical world. So you're blurring the lines here between like what the internet does and how it can actually reach out and touch you. And again, I believe it's sort of a force for good. There's always concerns. I joke with people that remember the first time you went on Amazon and they wanted you to put your credit card in?
Yeah.
And you're like, everybody hesitated, right? And I'm like, should I really give my credit card? I've never done this before, just typed it into a box. And so there is that sort of like trust that needs to be built up over time.
Right.
And as more and more, as these systems get more intelligent and they get better, and there's a lot more value to them, I think at the end of the day, I kind of keep coming back to that, but there's more value to them, then I think people trust it a little bit more, and they just they're more accepting with it, just being a part of our general everyday life.
That makes sense. So with that idea of helping and establishing the community, I know you also do IoT Fuse. Tell me about what IoT Fuse is and what it does, and how that kind of is that sort of like helping keep people get to the next level sort of organization. Sure.
Yeah. So I co-founded IoT Fuse. I think it was back in 2013 or 2014. And prior to that, I had actually been. I'm kind of a community guy. I love starting communities, and I had started a community around mobile technology called Mobile Twin Cities, and kind of grew that into a conference with a guy named Phil Wilson. And we did this conference many years. And in kind of early 2011 or so, I started a new group in town focused on Arduino. It's an open source sort of programming language that allows you to rapid prototype and sort of like use hardware. And that's when the term sort of IoT was really starting to pick up. And kind of co-created this Internet of Things Hack Day, which was what can you build in 12 hours? So it brought together a bunch of different teams. Interestingly enough, a local company here called HabitAware actually was launched that at our very first Hack Day.
Anila was just on the show recently.
She was, yep. I listened to her. She did great. She's an amazing person.
She is fantastic.
Beyond just doing some monthly meetups and stuff like that, really more driven by the passion of education, right? And so how can we educate people on this, not only from a technology standpoint, but also from a product standpoint, and bringing together, that's the idea of fusing, is you're really sort of fusing together and investors and executives and marketing and everything like that,
right,
with people that are the builders of it. So we formed a 501c3 nonprofit actually, and started getting, companies to help us run a large conference. And so we're now in our fifth year of doing a conference. IoT Fuse is, most people think of it as just this conference that we do. We're doing a 3-day conference in April, the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. First 2 days are workshops. So if you're interested in learning and want to get some hands-on stuff, we'll be having 20 or so companies showing stuff off.
What's a typical workshop like? What are you doing now?
Yeah, it's about 2 hours long, and we will let you know what you should bring with regards to tools, anything ahead of time, and then it'll be sort of hands-on, be very interactive and hands-on. And so Lab 651, we did one last year. It was really around artificial intelligence and machine learning. We had everybody in the room. Actually, we installed an app on their phone that allowed them to track, basically use the accelerometer and gyroscope on there, and we started tracking movements, and then started noticing anomaly detection, right? So imagine a motor is moving left, right. All of a sudden it starts moving up, down. Well, then we started basically being able to classify that and then send out messages based on that. So this year it's going to be a little more focused on open source technologies. So a lot of people are using are using Google or Amazon or Microsoft to store a lot of this data that's coming off these these devices? Well, what if you don't want to do that?
Right.
What if you want to stand up your own server, run it in your own data center? So we're going to kind of walk you through some of those steps. So yeah, it's very much for practitioners, people that are sort of like, hands-on, want to see the latest tools and latest stuff. And then April 25th is going to be the main conference. Last year we had around 1,200 people attend. So very big. It'll be at the convention center. And so we're really excited about that. But like I say, the conference it's a focal point, but it's not the only point of the year. Like I say, we have a monthly meetup where we meet the third Thursday of every month. And that is everything from people just showing off cool stuff that they're building to asking questions, to having panels, discussing, what does the Internet of Things mean? You talk about security. We're actually in May, we're going to have a cybersecurity, and in May, we're basically going to have a cybersecurity expert and also somebody who's a patent, who's an attorney, who's basically talking about the legality of all this data. So it's going to be really fun. We're going to kind of blend the legal aspect with a lot of the tech stuff.
That's really cool. So, again, going back to what you had said about sort of this all being sort of new in how people are working with it. If you were somebody listening to this and you wanted to explore, you wanted your organization to explore more, right? Obviously, you can go and educate yourself, but when is a good time to bring in a partner around IoT? Like, how far along should you be before, I want to talk to, like, do I already have to have everything identified and like my data plan and what my analytics and my ROI are already figured out?
As early as possible, man. Seriously, as early as possible, because we've gotten into so many companies where the edict has kind of come down that we need some IoT technology. And then there's a manager or somebody turns around and calls us, and they're like, "We need some IoT," and we're like,
"Put some IoT on this, Justin."
That's exactly it. Yeah, and so those projects actually end up not going very well, quite frankly, because there wasn't clear definition ahead of time. Number one, number two, what business use case you're solving? It just kind of came down, build this thing, and then once you do build it, then it gets kind of pushed back up the chain, and the person who kind of authorized it was like, "I didn't ask for this," and why are we spending a whole bunch of money on this? And I don't see this. So earliest as possible. And I think, again, a lot of companies are out there open to engaging with people just that, hey, let's have a conversation, right? And let's just sort of try and pick out some of the, and I keep moving it back to, it's not the technology. Get the technology out of the way. It's what are the business use cases that you're trying to solve, and oftentimes for us, you should take a step back in your business and you're like, how could I decrease costs? How could I increase revenue? Or how could I improve the quality of life, for me or my customer? And those are sort of the three tenets that we kind of like work under. And if you're not solving one of those three things, you shouldn't do it. Yeah. Right. I mean, don't just throw money at a problem that really doesn't exist, and do your homework up front.
But I have all this extra money, Justin. I want to throw it at stuff. No, that's really good advice. One of the other problems, and I talk about it a lot on the show, is when people what I've also seen is when people collect a lot of this data, they don't know how to make decisions after they have all this data. How do they use that data? I run into, you probably do as well, but I can't tell you how many organizations I run into where they've got loads of data. And I'm like, cool, how do you use that to make decisions? And they're like, we have loads of data.
Right.
And I'm sure you've run into that before, right? How have you coached people around kind of breaking out of that habit and learning how to, actually make good decisions with data?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them I just say, what do you want to know? What piece of information, forget about how we get it or what the data underneath looks like, but what would you like to know about that customer? Or what would you like to know about that piece of machinery in the field? Or what would you like to know about that bin that is out in the field or what's going on? So what key piece of information would you like to know that would have the biggest impact on how you run your business? And we just work back from there, and do you have the data? If you do, great. And you may not have the right, data scientists, and that's where we can help, but you might not have the right tools or a scalable system, but those are the follow-on things. At the end of the day, we really just say, what do you want to know? And oftentimes they sometimes just don't have it, right? And so they're like, okay, well, we have a starting point. And then also, if you knew that information, then coming back to the ROI and the financial side, you kind of put your financial hat on. If you knew that information, what would be the impact of your business? And if you can show show some clear return on investment, then all the data you're collecting has been useful. You're right. There's tons of companies out there that are collecting it just for the sake of collecting it, and they may or may not know if they're going to need it in the future. And that's one tactic. I have nothing wrong with that. Disk-based is cheap, and if something's out there in the field and you're collecting it, why not? But I will put a caveat on that, because you're running some liability. It depends on the type of information you're trying to save. But I tell companies, if you're going to be held liable and you don't need it, don't send it. Right. So any sorts of, that's the best security. It's basically security by not sending it. And so that's the other thing that I try and assess with companies is there any sort of personally identifiable information in here? And if you have it, we got to figure out how to use it, because if we're not going to use it, you better stop sending it.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Yeah. No, having the rules be simple for people, especially around technology, is sometimes your best answer, right?
Yeah. And I will say a lot of people maybe don't know what sensors are out there, and so we find a lot of education on that. Or they've been watching too much sci-fi. Honestly, they're like, oh, I should be able to walk by this and all of a sudden have it just be able to read my entire biometrics and know my blood pressure just from 50 feet away and everything like that. And I'm like, you've been watching too much Star Trek right now.
Yeah, so. Right. It's like the Theranos documentary on HBO where it's an amazing documentary if you haven't seen it.
I know I haven't.
It's all about this startup that was basically like, we're going to do full blood lab tests from the finger prick instead of doing the IV sort of thing. And everybody's like, that doesn't work because it's different kind of cells and things in these two different things. They were like, no, the technology is going to catch up. And they became like evaluated for $9 billion. And then finally they got the rug pulled out from underneath them because everybody found out couldn't actually do it.
Was there a woman who was the CEO?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They've been talking about it a lot in the news.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
but they made a whole documentary on it?
Yeah. It's on HBO. It literally, my wife and I sat there with our jaws on the floor. Like, how did they pull the wool over the people's eyes for so long? It's amazing. But to that point, just like you're saying, like, I think a lot of people, whether or not so there is the side that they don't know that they need it, right? They don't know what they don't know. And then there's the other side that has grandiose expectations around this sort of thing, right? Because, to your point, it's either sci-fi or some random consultant has told them, like, this is totally possible and you should find an implementer to do that for you.
Yeah, and I think there's some human psychology there too, right? We want to believe it.
Yeah.
If you can convince yourself of just about anything if you want to believe it. Right. And so you want to believe it so much, and it has to be possible. So,
I do it to myself every day, Justin. So cool. Yeah. Well, Justin, I want to thank you for coming to the show today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I learned a lot.
Likewise.
And so if I want to learn more, obviously about Lab 651, and then about the conference, like, where is the best places for me to go on the internets?
Yeah. Well, of course, websites. So lab651.com and IoTfuse.com too. We have got, Twitter, LinkedIn,
all the things,
Facebook, all the things, all the social media things. Those are great places to go. I would also encourage you to attend one of our IoT Fuse monthly meetups. So the third Thursday of every month. And so we're on meetup.com/IoT Fuse. So that's a great place to kind of get into the community in terms of what's going on out there. I think we have probably close to 2,000 people on our inner meetup list. And then, like I say, attend the conference. Like I say, there's 2 days of workshops if you want to get hands-on, sort of roll up your sleeves. Otherwise, April 25th, it's going to be huge. And we're going to have, 40-some speakers, and we're going to take over the convention center and rule the world of Internet of Things.
Or the things on the Internet.
Yeah. Depends on your perspective.
It does. Well, my perspective is I really appreciate you, and I appreciate the work you do. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Kurt. This is a blessing. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I appreciate you coming. If there's any links that people want to see, they'll be in the show notes, because Justin's going to send me all those things that I'll put in the blog. I'll put in the blog for everybody. So again, thank you, Justin.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to The Schmidt List. If you want to learn more about how Foundry accelerates innovation, check out foundrymakes.com. And if you'd like me to speak about establishing a growth mindset at your conference or with your team, drop me a note at kurt@foundrymakes.com. Oh, and the next time you're on the internet, head to iTunes and leave the show a review. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, because sharing is caring. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show, and I hope you have a fantastic week.